Well, once Russia came into the war, the Germans had worked it out pretty well, and within 6 or 8 weeks they had got to within about 20 miles of Moscow, and the Russian forces were nearly all wiped out. Well, ourselves and the Americans wanted to support Russia, and the best way to do it was by convoys round the north of Norway and into either the harbour of Murmansk or to another one, I can't remember its name now, just further round, but the other one used to get iced in during the winter. So that was when Russian convoys started. For the first 9 months or so, the Germans didn't interfere with these convoys too much. But then, as the Russians were beginning to fight back against the Germans, and the Germans thought the Russians were getting reinforcements from these convoys, so the Germans started then attacking the convoys in three ways. First of all, submarines. Secondly, aircraft. When they'd occupied Norway, they had airfields with all their bombers right up to the top of Norway. And thirdly, surface ships. They had a battleship called the Tirpitz, and they had some cruisers and things like that. And because of the ice that you get up in the North Arctic, there was a gap in the winter of only about 150 miles between Norway and the ice. In the summer, it was about 300 miles. But in the summer up in the north, you have virtually no dark. It gets a little bit twilight between 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock at night, but virtually there's hardly any night. So the German bombers could attack you all the time then. Anyway, this 1944, January or February, we set off with about 6 other destroyers, escorting, I think, about 25 merchant ships in a convoy. And because this was February, it was winter, the weather was appalling, the sea was freezing cold. If you were unlucky and you ended up in the sea, within about 5 or 10 minutes, you'd be dead. And even if you were rescued after 5 minutes, or if you were in a lifeboat for 2 or 3 days, you'd get what was called gangrene. Your limbs would be frozen, and that would kill you in the end, and that particular limb, whether it was a leg or an arm, would have to be amputated. Anyway, we set off, and on about the third night, the destroyer next to us was torpedoed. It was pitch dark, it was about 8 o'clock at night, pitch dark, very rough, and sort of little snow clouds coming past all the time. The visibility was terrible. And we were trying to find the submarine as well. And then about an hour later, that destroyer was torpedoed again. And this time it blew up. And out of a crew of about 200, I think only 16 were picked out of the water. So that was typical, really, of what would happen with a warship, because warships don't have many lifeboats. Anyway, fortunately, we were not torpedoed, but it was quite a shock to know what could happen unexpectedly. And we went on then about another 3 or 4 days, and we got to Murmansk, where we had 2 days resting in Murmansk and refueling, and then we turned round and came back with 25 empty ships.